So the second video in my Dune series, I'm going to talk about some of the series' overarching themes. And in the next videos, I will go through and I'll look at each book individually. So to start off with, I have a good back of the envelope list of themes that run throughout the entire series. The first, and I think maybe the largest theme, although that's debatable, political power. So how do you gain political power? How do you lose political power? What does it mean to wield political power? And you see this throughout the entire series from the very first novel. In the first novel, the main character, Paul, is the son of a duke. There's sort of an interplay between some royal families. There's an emperor. Eventually, in the end, spoiler alert if you haven't read the book, but Paul ousts the emperor of the known galaxy, Shaddam IV. And he becomes emperor basically of the known, I want to say known universe, but I would guess I would say the galaxy or the known galaxy. You see this theme sort of repeated throughout the series. So you have Dune Messiah, Children of Dune. When God Emperor Dune comes along, sort of that's where the real change is. I mean, I would definitely separate the books in. There's the first three, and they belong in their own trilogy. There's the fourth one, which sort of stands on its own, and then there's 5 and 6. I heard that there was meant to be a 7th Dune, but I'm not 100% sure on that. I'll check Wikipedia. I'll read some stuff. I'll get back to you on that when I talk about them. The next theme that's really, really common is religion. So in the future, the book is set, I believe, in the year 2000 or 10,000 AD. So, you know, what, about 8,000 years from now. And the religions that we know of today have sort of morphed into something a little bit different. There's some splinter groups. I believe most of the, at least the way I interpret this, that most of the world's major religions sort of morphed into one. And then there's this thing called the Orange Catholic Bible. And it has, I don't know what's in the Orange Catholic Bible, but yeah, it's sort of like Orange Catholicism, I guess, is like a mixture of all the main religions. Although there are references to this thing called Zen Sunniism, which is like a mixture of Buddhism and a type of Islam. And honestly, there's a lot of world building in this, and some of the details are just never revealed. You know, it kind of leaves you guessing or leaves it open to interpretation. Paul Atreides, who eventually becomes Muad'Dib, or Moabdib, I guess, is how it was pronounced on the audiobook version of it that I heard. He eventually becomes sort of like a pseudo-god on Earth, and then his son later becomes almost like a living god. So religion definitely plays a big role. Also, the ability of people to use religion as a way to help govern societies, which is very, very interesting. Next, economics. So there's some interplay within the universe. Basically, there's sort of 3 pillars of main government in the first book. There's the Imperium, or I guess the Emperor. You know, he's one of the 3 columns. There is what's called the Landsrat, which is sort of like the barons, the feudal houses. Think of it almost like the House of Lords, I guess, used to be in the UK, or Parliament even used to be in the UK. And then there's the Chome Company, which is this company that has a monopoly on space travel, and they sort of serve as the 3 main pillars. It's interesting because the Chome Company serves as like a sort of economic pillar of government, because again, they have a monopoly on space travel. So anything you have to transport through space, they have to carry. Anytime you transport an army or you transport a bunch of people through space, they have to carry it. They have a lot of control and a lot of say in what goes on, and they use this monopoly on space travel to their own advantage and their own political ends. They sort of become almost like a check on power for the Emperor and the Landsrat. And that's day 1 stuff for Dune too. That's not something that happens in the novels. That's sort of like established from moment 1 in the world, which I thought was really, really cool. It sort of fleshed out the world and gave it like a realistic tone. Things that I would compare it to is sort of like you hear about like the Dutch East India Company or the British East India Company. You know, those really, really large monopolies on trading with the East that in some cases had their own bureaucracy and even their own standing militaries and things like that. So those are really, really cool a way to think about it. It's something that until Dune I really hadn't seen, or yeah, I really hadn't experienced in a work of fiction. But it's kind of a common trope now. You see it a lot in other sci-fi works, other fantasy works, other things like that. Just speaks to the testament of like how deep and rich the universe of Dune is. Another great theme is ecology and the environment. So for those of you who don't know, Dune takes place on a huge desert planet called Arrakis. Dune is sort of the planet's nickname. And there's a lot of interplay between the characters and the ecology of the planet. You have we'll just call them normal people like you and me who aren't used to surviving in a desert. It's interesting to see how they react to Dune when Paul goes to Dune for the first time, and how life changes on Dune and how normal people live on Dune. And then there's the Fremen, who are basically desert warriors who have mastered the very, very harsh climate and environment of Dune and wield it to their own advantage. Eventually, throughout the series, and again, spoiler alert, but throughout the series, Dune is terraformed to make the climate more hospitable. And throughout the series, it's interesting to see how the characters and society adapt to Dune becoming a more hospitable planet for life, and what sort of effect that has on the religion that comes after Muad'Dib, and just the people and the universe in general. Fate versus free will. Now, this is very, very interesting and plays a huge role, especially in later novels. Some of the characters in Dune are, I believe it's prescient or prescience. I don't know how to say it. They can kind of see the future. And, are they locked in sort of like train on a track and they can't deviate from that? Or do they have free will? Can they choose their own destiny? In some cases, the book is very, very ambiguous on this, or at least the whole series is very, very ambiguous on this. Sometimes they're sort of locked into a course of action, and then in other times it seems like the characters have free will and are able to avoid some stuff. I think Herbert was purposely ambiguous about that, and he uses it to great effect. And I complained in my last video, the fourth book is my least favorite, and I'll talk about this more when we get to the fourth book, but that's one of the reasons that I don't like the fourth book, is because it's all about predestination, and let's just say the ending of the book is exactly what you think it is from page 1, and I found that very frustrating, and that's what made me throw it across the room, because it's like a 600, 700 page book, and when it ends exactly like you predicted, you tend to have a normal angry reaction. Although a lot of people say that that's our favorite book, but we'll talk about it more in a little while. Tradition and culture. So the different houses, or the different kind of feudal lords in Dune, the planets have their own traditions, their own cultures, their own things like that. It's interesting to see how, especially when the Atreides family comes to Dune, how they adapt to Dune, how they try to change things so that they can thrive on Dune. That's in the very, very first novel, right? But, as time goes on, you see the Fremen who go out and conquer the universe, or the galaxy, how their culture is then transplanted to other worlds. And eventually in book 5 and 6, you get to see that come full circle when, other things start to come back to Dune. So, the idea of tradition and culture and how that plays, not just like in general, and the things you do and the holidays you celebrate and all that kind of stuff, but also tradition and culture as a means of survival. So like a lot of the Fremen traditions were what helped them survive in the harsh desert climate of Dune. And finally, the last thing I really want to talk about is family. You see this throughout the book. So there's the Atreides family. Paul, again, is the main character of the first book. Really the first 3, but, the main character of the first book. And, throughout the entire story is sort of like family. Family runs as an undercurrent. You are bound to the actions of your mother and father. Your children are sort of bound by your actions. and the effect that you have on your family and the people who come after you, even after your death. Especially true in the case of Moab Dib, who completely sort of changes the entire galaxy after he becomes sort of emperor of the known galaxy. So yeah, family is my final one. Are there any themes that I left out that I didn't talk about? I would like to have an extended discussion on every single one of these with somebody. So yeah, if there's a theme you left off, or which one do you think is most important? I guess that's it. A lot of people try to say religion is most important, and I think that's definitely true. But to me, a lot of times in the book, religion is a means of political power, and how it's applied and things like that. So yeah, like, comment, and subscribe. Be on the lookout for more videos. I'm going to do one about each book in the Dune series that's written by Frank Herbert, so all 6 of them. And I'll do some plot overviews, and be on the lookout, and spoiler warning.